What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are finally at the comic where Infernal Hulk fights the one above all. This has been a thing that's been coming for quite some time. So, what this does is this initially picks up out in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Florida of the North, and that it picks up with the Avengers, who are in some capacity trying to intervene with the Infernal Hulk. Now, for those of you guys who are out of the loop, I will fill you in here in a second, but we got to set the stage here, right? And so that's where Iron Man just says, they're all bottlenecked on the bridge. We will not get a better chance than this. And so that's where Carol Danvers says, then here we go, right? This is going to be a hard one. And the response of Iron Man, there's no one else. Save as many civilians as you can. Try to keep the monsters on the bridge and focus everything else on Hulk. And in the midst of all of this, the one above all appears. So this is not one of those stories where the one above all shows up at the very end of the comic to fight Infernal Hulk. No. He's here now. And in fact, it catches the Avengers off guard, right? I mean, it's just this bright blasting light that just flies from the heavens right down. And at that point, Iron Man is like, do not jump back yet, right? Like, stay here. And that's where the one above all just says, I see you, the corruptive seed of Venruvial, dressed in new flesh. I called this planet of your progeny once, let it be so again. So let's fill in some gaps here for those of you guys who don't know what's going on. But this takes us into Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk run and the introduction of the one below all. So the idea of the one below all, when it was originally pitched to us, is we did not know what the one below all was. And to kind of explain that fairly quickly here, the nature of the Green Door is that whenever those individuals who are imbued with gamma radiation die, they travel to the realm of the one below all. The Green Door opens and they can pass through it and return back to the mortal plane. So it was basically Al Ewing's way of explaining why it is that the Incredible Hulk specifically, but basically anybody with gamma radiation, can never really die. Now, in Immortal Hulk issue number 50, the Green Door was quote unquote closed, but more recently, the Incredible Hulk has still demonstrated immortality, so seemingly he's still able to come back from the dead, and the Immortal Hulk concept is still very much alive and well. But over the course of Al Ewing's run, what we ended up learning was two things. The first is that the goal of the one below all was to actually bond to the Hulk, and then basically go into what was going to be the new universe and just dominate everything. And in fact, we saw that play out, that the one below all in possession of the Hulk's body had wiped out all life across the universe, got there to the very end of things. I think it was Mr. Immortal who was there because the one below all had killed Franklin Richards, who was supposed to survive to the end of the universe alongside Galactus, and that what ended up happening is the one below all killed Mr. Immortal, bonded with the existence of the universe itself, and then was reborn into the new reality. That's what was supposed to happen, ultimately because of the actions of the Immortal Hulk. But by the end of the story, we ended up finding out that the one below all was the dark counterpart to the one above all. Now, how do you square that circle? Well, that takes us into Philip Kennedy Johnson's Incredible Hulk and Infernal Hulk run. Specifically, Incredible Hulk issues 1, 3, and then 28 through 29, if you decide that you want to read it. What ended up happening here was that while all of creation basically exists at the hands of the one above all in one form or another, despite the fact that he is more or less a prime mover, the Mother of Horrors came into existence absent the one above all, meaning without the one above all's hand being involved in her creation. And she was seemingly equal to the one above all in power. Venruvial was extremely powerful. And so what ends up going on is that Venruvial, basically having a vendetta against the one above all, ends up hiding Earth from existence alongside herself. And then she spawns two offspring. The first one is the eldest, which, as you would expect from her name, she's the oldest of the children. The second one was Udru. Now, Udru was particularly important because the purpose of Udru's creation was to basically destroy the one above all. What ended up happening was that when the one above all realized that Earth was not there, shrouded in darkness, basically hidden from him, he couldn't figure out why. So he shows up to Earth with this spear made out of his own energy, cuts the Earth in half, and finds the Mother of Horrors hidden inside. And in that moment, the Mother of Horrors essentially infected the one above all. And that's what led to the one above all forming the one below all, or hulking out into the one below all during the fight between the one above all and Udru. Now, Udru was ultimately defeated, Eldest was defeated, Mother of Horrors herself was demoralized with what was essentially the death of one of her children. And so because of that, she refused to fight against the One Above All again. And so what ends up happening is that while the Eldest had scoured the world trying to find a way to bring the Mother of Horrors back, the Eldest ended up bonding itself to the Incredible Hulk after removing the Bruce Banner persona physically, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. But that lands us into Philip Kennedy Johnson's Incredible Hulk run towards the end and the Infernal Hulk run, because what ends up happening is that once the Eldest is in possession of the Incredible Hulk's body, the Eldest goes to visit the Mother of Horrors and tries to get her to relaunch her campaign against the One Above All. Because the Mother of Horrors is so demoralized, the Eldest takes the power of the One Above All, and that lands us here. And so back to the here and now, in the fight between the two of these guys. The Avengers are watching all of this unfold, and literally it's just like, is that what I think it is? Right? And Steve just says, the One Above All. And so Iron Man just tells everybody, give them some space and focus on the others. Let's see how this plays out. Because what else can they do? Right? I mean, you're literally talking about two beings of unfathomable power. Now, one of the other things to notice here is that this fight, as it's going to take place, is going to be a fist fight. It's a knockdown, drag-out fight between these two, mostly because that's how Infernal Hulk operates, because that's what the Hulk is known for, but also because of the fact that while Philip Kennedy Johnson likely could have done this as something like a metatextual fight, with them distorting reality around them, honestly, it would have just ended up like the Mad Jim Jaspers and Fury fight, right? Basically two beings that had the ability to alter reality, where all they did was just start altering the appearance of everything around them, distorting everything. But there's no real way to win that fight. You ultimately just kind of end up in a stalemate. But that's where the Infernal Hulk addresses the One Above All directly and says, you, right? You surprise me. How long since your feet touched the dust of a world that you had made? No matter. We watered the earth with your blood before. It's time it was watered again. And as soon as the Hulk goes in for the attack, the One Above All clocks him on the spot and just sends him crashing down to the ground and into the water. This is the knockdown, drag-out fight. And the One Above All just says, I see your mind. The very knowledge of you offends me. Washing away the stain of you will be the labor of 1,000 years. But Infernal Hulk says, I see your mind as well. I see the truth of you, and you are not he, and tears the One Above All in half. Now, here's the craziness about all of this. There's two ways to interpret this scenario, right? That what ends up happening is that when we get the true form of this being who kind of casts off the appearance of the One Above All, that this being says, loathsome creature, I am he, the vessel of his wrath, wielded by his mind. As thy hands and eyes and beating heart are thee, I am no less the One Above All. Now, this has led to a lot of debate, and that's why I say there's a couple ways to interpret this. Number one, you could interpret it as just a physical manifestation of the One Above All. The One Above All has done that multiple times in Marvel Comics. The most notable example of that was in Sensational Spider-Man, when the One Above All appeared to Peter Parker as a homeless man. Now, of course, the two of them didn't fight, and it was really more just the One Above All helping Peter come to terms with the fact that Aunt May very well die, with her having been shot in the aftermath of Peter revealing his identity during Civil War, right? I mean, it basically put a target on Aunt May and the people that were closest to Peter. It was like his worst fear come true. On the other hand, by all standards of measurement, this being is essentially an avatar, right? Now, some people would say that it's a vessel, but the reality here is that within Marvel Comics, when you're talking about beings that channel the power of another being, which is to say, they basically operate in the role that being would play whenever they appear to anybody, they're essentially an avatar. And again, making this statement, right? The vessel of his wrath, wielded by his mind, as thy hand and eyes and beating heart are thee, I am no less the One Above All. It's basically saying, I am imbuing the power of the One Above All in the here and now. So it's basically the One Above All with a physical form that can be destroyed, even if it is only a vessel or an avatar. But seemingly, it's not the full might of the One Above All. But that's where things get murky here, right? Because lest we forget, the Mother of Horrors was equal to the One Above All in power, or at least seemed to be. We didn't get like the full totality of that conflict top to bottom. It was really more just kind of a recap when Philip Kennedy Johnson gave it to us. So there's ample argument to make here that yes, this vessel or angel has the full power of the one above all, but Infernal Hulk is just that strong. But if that's the case, then why walk around Earth creating monsters? Why not just reconstitute reality like that in the blink of an eye with a snap of a finger? Infernal Hulk should be powerful enough to do that if it's on the same level as the one above all. But that's where the Infernal Hulk, in hearing all of this, fires back and says, you are a slave, the servant he sent to die in his place. But the response of this angel, unclean thing, we are all his servants. And that's where Infernal Hulk doesn't care and smashes this guy anyway and just says, does he see you now? Your pretty slaver, your beloved one above all. And that's where the angel just responds, he sees all. And Infernal Hulk just says, good. And in turn, crushes this guy on the spot. And so in doing that, he just says, here is your slave, tyrant. Keep your other slaves safe in the sky, lest mothers come for them as well. And so with the Avengers seeing this, right, that's where the statement's made, Tony, can you see what happened up there? And Tony's like, yeah, right, it did not go our way. But we do have one thing that we didn't have before, because now what they have is intelligence. But the question that has to be asked here is this, right? Now, this is only the first half of everything, right? There's still the other half of this story. But here's the question to ask. If the one above all did not appear here directly, why not? Because keep in mind, in the Storm comics, the war above all is currently unfolding. That's taking place as well. And we know from the Thunder War storyline that the one above all is in some capacity directly involved and focusing on that. Now, technically the war above all seems to have more to do with Mistress Death than with the one above all himself, but it's a cosmic entity war. If you're not reading Storm, you are drastically missing out. It's probably one of the best comics coming out of Marvel right now, right? It's absolutely phenomenal. But the bigger point is this, you end up switching over to Muncie, Indiana, with Bruce Banner. And in fact, it's Bruce Banner speaking with Betty Ross, right? And so when he comes in and he greets her, he asks her, are you okay? And she says, just thinking about the day, right? Poor Natty. Ricky told me tonight that Tommy's casket is empty. Did you know that? Right? And Bruce is kind of taken aback by that. This is not the important part of the conversation, but it is worth kind of bringing in here for the sake of understanding where the two of them reside. And so Bruce just kind of says, God, seriously. And she says, Hulk turned that army base to dust, Bruce. Those soldiers are just gone. And that's where Bruce just responds and says, we're okay here, Betty. We're in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing here that the Hulk wants. We are safe. And Betty just kind of looks at him with almost a look of disgust or just complete and total shock. Because if there's any one thing that Bruce Banner should understand, it's this. He is never safe from the Hulk. There have certainly been instances in Marvel Comics when the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner have been separated from one another. I believe it happened in the Onslaught saga. I know it happened when Dr. Doom split Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk into two different people. But the bigger point is that Betty Ross just kind of thinks that Bruce is seemingly being naive. And that's what she says, right? Natty buried her son today, and she's by herself. I am going over to check on her. Or are we so safe that we don't look after our friends now? And so when they go to take off, right, Bruce just says, Betty, what I said earlier, I'm sorry. I know we've had different perspectives on everything that's happened. And he says, a normal life has just been so unavailable to me for so long. Now that we have it, I guess that I've been, and then it cuts off, right? He kind of stutters, but seemingly he was going to say, I guess I've just been so enamored with it. And that's a true statement. Bruce has never really been able to live a normal life ever since the Gamma experiment. And so why would you want to walk away from that? Why would you want to leave that opportunity to have some measure of normalcy? But it's like it was stated in Magneto Resurrection. Bruce Banner is choosing a neat lie over a messy truth. And that's where Betty just says, it's fine. Let's just see if Natty needs anything. And so when they get to the house, right, the kitchen light's on, but then the door's propped open. And that's when the question's asked, right? Why is her door open? It's pissing rain outside, which is a phrase I haven't heard in a long time. And that's where a scream comes from the inside of the house. So at that point, Betty's just like, that was Natty. And Bruce tells her, right, stay outside, call 911. But when he gets inside, there's just this voice, right? Mom, like, Mama, it's me. I'm home. just like you wanted. And it's Tommy who's reanimated here. Not only that, he's essentially a monster, right? This is the other half of what the Infernal Hulk has been doing. That what the Infernal Hulk has been doing was traveling around to different places, military bases, so on and so forth, and literally reconstructing hell on earth in a variety of ways, right? Basically a world of monsters. That's what he's been trying to do. But really the bigger picture here, when you zoom out, it's marshaling forces. That's really what Infernal Hulk has been doing. And it was one of these things where by the time the Avengers started picking up on what was happening and started realizing what was going on, the Infernal Hulk had already marshaled a pretty large number of people to his side. By no standard of measurement is it like most of the world or anything like that. Not at all, right? But he has marshaled a lot of people to his side. And that's where Tommy, looking back at Bruce and Betty, just says, go away. You're scaring mama. And so where Betty and Bruce are kind of playing defense here, like, no, it's not what you think, right? We're not here to really terrify anybody or anything like that, right? We seemingly just kind of want to talk. But Tommy ends up grabbing Bruce and just throwing it, right? And just says, I will kill you. And so Betty goes running to Natty and just says, we've got to go right now. But Natty doesn't really want to, right? At the end of the day, like, it's her kid, right? And that's where Tommy just says, do not touch my mom, and immediately goes after them, right? Mama's mine. Her blood and breath are mine. No one else's. And Bruce does what he can, right, to face off against this threat, but it's just Bruce Banner, a regular guy with no meaningful powers whatsoever. And so Bruce cracks this guy over the back with a liquor bottle and just says, you're dead, and just starts screaming it over and over and over again, right? Tommy turns around, clocks Bruce, right, I will kill you, and just says, mama, help me. It hurts because now he's setting on fire. And so at that point, immersed in flames, just jumps out of the side of the house and takes off running. And so where Natty has a difficult time believing that that's what's become of her son, right? At that point, Betty just says, that's not Tommy. You're gonna be okay, all right? Like, you are going to be okay. And that's where Bruce has to come to terms with everything that's been going on. There is no more hiding out. There is no more just pretending the threat is over there. And if you just stick your head in the sand, the threat goes away. No, right? He says, you were right, Betty, about everything. We cannot hide here. There's nowhere to hide. We have to go back. And so the question becomes, what happens when Bruce Banner goes back and tries to retake control of the Hulk's body? Because lest we forget, while Venruvial is in possession of the Infernal Hulk's body, the Incredible Hulk persona, along with all the other Hulk personas, Worldbreaker, the whole 9 yards, they're all still trapped inside the body with Venruvial, quote unquote, driving the car. But we know that they're trying to engineer their own escape. They're basically trying to retake control of the Hulk's body from Venruvial. So the fight's kind of being fought on both sides. One part in the Mindscape, or the Hulkscape as it's called, and on the outside with superheroes doing what they can and Bruce Banner returning. There's still some characters that we have not seen yet. Devil Hulk, different things like that. We don't know if they're going to make a return. It would be dope if they did, right? Titan Hulk hasn't shown up yet, and that would be dope too, because Titan Hulk was cracked. That was the most powerful version of the Hulk that we have ever seen outside of Infernal Hulk. It's next level. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.